He wants regime change in Venezuela.
He's talking about starting on land pretty soon.
The last time I checked, Congress had not declared war on Venezuela. No one really fully understands what Trump is trying to achieve. Even the members of Congress of his own party don't have a clue what the end game is.
Are we just being naive, and is this really just about oil?
Donald Trump is trying to amass as much cash as he can. People, take your head out of your behinds and understand what's happening here.
Hello and welcome to The Rest is Politics US with me, Katty Kay, and joined by the very special friend of our show and friend of mine, the former Republican Lieutenant Governor of Maryland and RNC chair and now co-host of the Weeknight and very able substitute for some guy called Anthony something on this program, Michael Steele. So
hey,
good to have you back.
How are you?
I'm good.
It's good. Hey, look, you know me. I'm always a fan of crossing the pond, baby. I'm good to be back with you. I'm excited. There's nothing to talk about. We can just talk about holiday recipes.
Wow. Wouldn't that be nice? Let's start with Venezuela, though, because it's been a kind of interesting few days. You've had the Americans seizing this oil tanker on Wednesday and saying they're going to keep the oil, saying that this was one of those dark fleet ships that was busting sanctions and getting oil to Cuba, and it shouldn't have been allowed to do that under international law. So they said, okay, well, we can take it. They had those amazing pictures of the Marines going, are they Marines? You'd know that better than me, going down the ropes from the helicopters anyway. It looked like something out of a fairly bad Tom Cruise movie.
Well, that's all a part of the performance, yes.
It's part of the show. Yeah, actually, that's a very good point, Michael, because they videoed the whole thing, right? They wanted us to see that. And they wanted, presumably, the Venezuelans to see that, too.
Yeah, they wanted us to see that, but we can't somehow see the video of them killing two innocent individuals who have been stranded in the waters trying to survive after the first strike on their boat.
Selective video releasing.
I think it's very, very important for folks to understand that this effort of engagement that we have right now taking place is not only a threat to stability in this region, but potentially stability globally because of the relationships that Venezuela has beyond this hemisphere. Right. And so its alliances that it has with Russia and others may come into play at some point if this goes too far. So the question is, what's too far? I think it's important also for people to understand that U.S. interdiction on the seas is not unusual. That's what our Coast Guard does. Particularly if any vessel is suspected of engaging in illegal activity, whether it is shipping of oil to a country that should not be getting that oil, or running drugs into the United States or anywhere else that comes across territorial waters.
So that side of it, the president has jurisdiction over, right? That's my understanding too, that if he was seizing this oil tanker, even just if it was the Coast Guard stopping these drug carrying boats, that would all be fine and dandy. I mean, Congress would have to cede power to the president over that, right?
They cede power, but they still have an oversight responsibility. So the War Powers Act of the United States does give the president enormous preference, if you will, to engage in this activity. But he has to account for what he's doing. He has to inform Congress of the findings that his Justice Department or FBI or intelligence agencies have gathered that led him to engage in the activity. So, for example, the Venezuelan boat strikes would normally be carried out by our Coast Guard. They would not be strikes. They would apprehend the boat. They would stop it. They would board the boat. They would arrest the individuals on the boat. They would document what's on the boat. And then they would proceed to criminal proceedings to prosecute those individuals, either send them back to their country or put them in jail.
And Michael, quickly, just let me ask you this. I like the way you're laying this out. So that is the process as it normally should happen. Is that a process that's written into statute? Is that a process that is in the Constitution? Is that just one of those norms and traditions of democracy that so many of which have been flouted recently?
It's written into statute, the process. Now, some of it is based off of protocol and process. An agency says, okay, this is how we will interdict a boat or a ship on the waters, or this is what we will do if asked to engage on land somewhere. So they have internal operational functions that they carry out. But that's driven by the federal code, undergirded by statute that has been authorized by Congress. And again, I give you the War Powers Act, which covers a lot of this activity when it involves extra engagement by the United States under the direction of the President of the United States. So whether you're talking about the ships, land becomes a whole different ballgame.
Which, by the way, the president said, right? On Friday, I think it was, he said, it's going to be starting on land soon. He also said they've treated us badly and I guess we're not treating them so good too. That's kind of Trumpian way of saying he's not happy and he's doing this stuff.
Well, he's not happy. No one really gives a damn whether or not he's happy, because that's not the standard by which one invades another country. Whether or not the president is happy. Now, if Venezuela wants all this to go away, just create a little phony FIFA type award and send it over to him. He'll go in the room and he'll slather all over that, and maybe, things will lessen. But the reality of it is he wants regime change in Venezuela.
Why? Why do you think it is, Michael? Because I think that's one of the big questions here.
I think that's a very important question that folks here in Washington really don't have an answer to. Because first off, it is not the public policy of the United States to engage in regime change, number one. Number two, if there is an underlying policy of regime change, you're certainly not going to go about it this way. That puts too much emphasis and too much conversation in space about what's happening and what you're doing. Congress, again, would be engaged in it. And even the members of Congress of his own party don't have a clue what the end game is with Venezuela. You just cannot roll up on a country and start bombing their sites on their soil, particularly if you're talking about drugs. When did we get into the drug enforcement business in Venezuela? Right. And so if you're trying to interdict drugs coming into the United States, oh, by the way, so folks also know, fentanyl from Venezuela doesn't exist.
Yeah, doesn't come from there.
The fentanyl that's in this country largely comes from China.
These drugs were going to Suriname or something anyway.
And to the extent that it comes through Mexico, you know who brings it into the country? Americans. Americans are the largest transporter of fentanyl into the United States. So all of this is a ruse for a game that no one really fully understands what Trump is trying to achieve with Venezuela. Does he have a stick up his butt about Maduro? Possibly, but why? To what end? And I think you could say that about a whole lot of world leaders that Donald Trump engages with. So Venezuela is a particularly ticklish problem for Republicans because the administration is acting without really giving them, since they're in the majority, a roadmap of why he's doing what he's doing. And the evidence and the facts don't align with his level of engagement.
So I had a good conversation just before we taped this with somebody who's a Venezuelan economist who's pretty close to the opposition, and said that there are conversations going on now between the White House and Maduro about giving Maduro and people around Maduro safe passage out of the country via Qatar or via Belarus or somewhere. And that the conversations are back and forth about, would it just be Maduro? Would it be Maduro plus 10 of his people around him, plus 20 of his people around him? Would it be which top military leaders would go with him. It's not clear that Maduro necessarily wants this. Apparently, Maduro initially suggested, okay, I'll step down. My vice president can take over and we'll have elections in a year's time. And the White House said, yeah, no thanks. We don't want that. But they are clearly very focused on getting rid of Maduro and of bringing Maria Cortina, who just got the Nobel Prize and did this dramatic escape to Norway. They want her to come back, and she has a whole team. She's got economists. She's got people planning healthcare. She's got people planning education. I mean, there is a kind of government in waiting, and she won last year's election. This question of why is so interesting. Are we just being naive, and is this really just about oil? But this seems risky, especially if he's talking about starting on land pretty soon, which was a very striking phrase to me that he used this weekend. Is he going to start bombing their telecoms communications or their other infrastructure? It's a high-risk strategy to get Venezuela's oil production back on stream with the aim of what? Bringing up oil supplies so that American prices come down and inflation comes down in the United States. Is this the way he's hoping that he can bring down prices of groceries in America? I don't really know. That's the only logical thing. But God, this is a pretty high stakes way of doing that, because our track record on regime change isn't the best. Yeah,
I mean, we've had this issue going back to the first term with Venezuela. And Maduro, folks, as everybody knows, no saint. The man stole an election. All right. So maybe he's just jealous because Maduro was successful and Trump wasn't. Who knows with these crazy ass people? Both of them.
The things that unite us in life, right?
Yes. I mean, come on. Let's stop pretending that, we're dealing with, rational human beings here who have a lot of political power. Neither one of these men should be in the jobs they're in. And so the reality is, to your point, it presents a problem for a number of interests, not just those in the oil industry, not just those that have some economic potential gain from correcting the relationship between the United States and Venezuela when it comes to oil. Okay, if that's a thing. But it also has very, very, I think, concerning narratives around the use of force to get your way in a situation like this. And whether or not any country, let alone the United States, should be the bully the way we've been, as opposed to, if you really want Maduro replaced, then work the ground, work with, groups that are in the democracy space trying to fix what is ailing their country right now. Putting in place, as you referenced, you have a sort of government in waiting. How do you assist in that effort without direct interference? I mean, there are any number of ways to do it, but to sit there and go, well, we're just going to start bombing on your land, and we're going to take out, we're going to make up stories about drug runners and cartels coming out of Venezuela into the United States to justify killing over 80 people. There is no situation in which that is legitimate unless there is a declaration of war.
The other risk for when the Pottery Barn rule applies, you break it, you own it, right? I mean, I know that there are differences between Venezuela and Syria and Iraq. Venezuela's had a democracy. They had elections last year. Somebody was duly elected. Okay, the elections were overturned by Maduro, but there's a much stronger tradition of democracy, and you don't have the ethnic differences that you had in Iraq, for example. So I get that argument, and I think it's a very valid argument. I think the problem is that if America owns this regime change, which it will do with these boat strikes, with the kind of pressure that it's putting on Maduro, especially if it starts targeting in any way things on land, even if it's not American boots on the ground. And then let's say you get the opposition comes into power and she has her people around her. But the narco-terrorists, what are they going to do? Is this going to be a Colombia type situation where they're going to go away and give up this incredibly lucrative business and say, okay, fine. Right, we're going to go sell candy now. I mean, and I meant real candy, not that kind of candy. Why would they do that? They have everything to lose here.
Exactly. And it tells you why you shouldn't do this the way it's being done.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Given your conversations with officials in London and in other parts of Europe, we're starting to see now our allies go, you know what? We're just going to check out on this whole Venezuela thing. We're just we're not sharing any information with you because y'all don't know how to treat it, number one, because we don't trust your intelligence, because you got someone in the Department of Defense who just likes to talk on, public chat lines. How are the European leaders looking at this situation, and what is the value to them to either lean in to try to move Trump off of some of the craziness that he's engaged in, or step back and just kind of wait and see how it plays out?
I mean, you're right about everyone's worried about sensitive stuff ending up on group chats with journalists on them. I don't know why Pete Hegseth has not added me to a group chat yet, but that's super annoying. If he'd like to, I'm happy to join a Signal chat with sensitive information on it, just so you know. That has not happened yet, but you've got that concern. You've also got the concern that, hold on a second, if we do hand over sensitive information and a war crime is proven to have been committed. So I've heard reports that Europeans are nervous about the intelligence being used in a way that is not legal, and to abet something that could be a war crime. That's obviously concerning to them. But beyond that, you have, the Chancellor of Germany this weekend saying, guys, the Pax Americana's over. The party's done. Change of policy here. Wake up and smell the coffee. We have to go this alone, or go this with somewhere else. Beijing, by the way, are you listening? So I think there's a lot of concerns about what the Americans are doing. And there's been I've read some great reporting on this, even the Wall Street Journal has actually been very clear on this. There are rules of war for a reason. And it is a real test of democracy that you adhere to the rules of war. Now, we don't know if the rules of war have been broken in the case of the boat strikes, but we need some kind of investigation and we need transparency. We all need to see that second video of the two people, as you say, who look like they are on an upturned table, it sounds like, from the people who have seen it, pose absolutely no threat and then are blown out of the water. So I think we need a lot more transparency, and everyone around the world who's watching this is going to be a lot more nervous.
That last point, I think, is why we have not seen the tape, and we likely won't see the tape. The imagery of that act will be more powerful than any image that has come before it. Trump loves posting, or at least at the time, of, oh yes, doing my yippee-ki-yay, cowboy bullshit, and just kind of like doing all this stuff and look at how we're blowing up these narco terrorists, right? Video 1. Video 2 is after you blew them up to survive, and they're scrambling in the water and they're clinging on to debris to try to save their own lives. And then, as some have seen it, members of Congress that I've had on my show have said, it looks like they're waiting for someone to rescue them, and then they're blown up. And that imagery is one that this government cannot allow to be indelibly linked in the minds of the American people and the globe, for that matter. That's going to create an enormous amount of pressure on this administration setting up going into next year's political cycle. You won't believe how much that piece linked with the Epstein files plays a narrative in American politics, which we've already seen the results from, right? The special elections that have been lost by Republicans, the narrowed wins in a place like Tennessee, one of the reddest states on the friggin' planet, narrowly electing a Republican member because of how these storylines are starting to eat at the American people. The overarching part of the question you asked at the beginning of why is he doing this is he doesn't care. Donald Trump is trying to amass as much cash as he can while he's in this job, whether it comes from the Saudis or Europe or Asia. He doesn't care. I mean, look at what they're doing with Ukraine. Where's the Secretary of State? Why do you have businessmen basically negotiating Ukraine? Oh, because there's a financial transaction on the back end with Russia.
Yeah.
People, take your head out of your behinds and understand what's happening here. Men and women are suffering here at home. Families are hurting economically. Internationally, we're just shooting people indiscriminately out of the water. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has this threat of doing deals all across. That's the transactional line.
That's why the phrase going around Washington at the moment is Maduro out, Chevron in. And
There you
that's
go.
basically the kind of White House
There you
policy.
go.
Remember that one, Maduro out, Chevron in. Okay, we're going to take a quick break and come back and talk about whether the GOP will get back to what has been understood as American Republican foreign policy for the last 70 years. Stay with us. Big question for you. What kind of a Christmas shopper are you? Are you the kind of person that leaves it to the last minute, or have you already got it done?
What do you think, Katty?
Obviously, you haven't even thought about anybody's Christmas present yet.
I'm a very busy man, and I believe in delegation, Katty. Really not that busy, but I thought I would say that to make myself feel self-important.
If you are like Anthony and have left it to the last minute again this year, we have the perfect gift idea for you.
Make someone that you love a founding member, Katty.
Exactly. It is the perfect present for the less organized among us. Mr. Scaramucci. You can schedule it now and it will land in their inbox on Christmas Day.
Listen, the political obsessives, and you have them around your dinner table, they're going to love this, okay? It's ad-free listening, members-only mini-series, bonus episodes, Q&As, and exclusive weekly newsletters from me and Katty Kay. It's so good, I'll probably be giving it to my whole family.
Your poor wife.
Listen, she loves The Rest is Politics US. Your friends and family will love The Rest is Politics US too. Just go to therestispoliticsus.com and click on gifts.
Okay, Michael Steele, you were chairman of the Republican National Committee from 2009 to 2011. That was the period in which
Hey,
look how well things went for you. You were the guy that gave Barack Obama a shellacking. You can gloat. It's okay. Okay, you can take a little moment, a little victory lap. Look,
I may not know how to do much, but I know how to win elections. What can I say?
You did the party proud. But that was the period, look, where you had Barack Obama go to the Middle East and give the big speech on Islam. You had the action in Libya. You had a kind of restoration. You had a pivot to Asia. You had him going around the world kind of trying to restore relations after the debacles in Iraq and Afghanistan. And to some extent in those first 2 years when you were, my memory is, there was actually quite a lot of Republican support for some of the foreign policy.
Yes.
That Barack Obama was enacting. Talk about how much you think the Republican Party has shifted from when you were chairman to what you see today when it comes to America's role on the world stage.
It's 180 degrees from where it was. The rules-based order that was established after World War II.
That's a drinking game, right? Every time you say rules-based order, we have to take a quick shot.
Well, happy hour for me starts whenever happy hour needs to start. That's how I roll, and that's usually pretty early in the day. But this idea that we're going to govern ourselves in this new alliance that we're creating, that we're going to be a check on aggressive behavior from nation states. All right. So that was in response to Germany, and it would later be in response to Russia, as it is today in response to China. And, but it's different with China because China is more economic. It's not military yet. A little thing called Taiwan sitting right over there, which could be a problem. But the reality is that this idea of order was important, and it has sustained the alliance and has been a check on bad actors. Yes, 9/11 notwithstanding and other acts isolated. But in the main, the alliance has been very good about that. And how that's translated here in the United States is that from successive administrations, there has been sort of an overlap in foreign policy. The basics, if you will, that look to our role with NATO, look to our role with, our other allies, certainly as we've developed in the last 10 years in the Pacific Rim, right? Particularly with, countries like Australia leading the way in that region. So we've had these relationships that has sustained the global order. And so when you go and you look at it, the foreign policy of George Herbert Walker Bush. Hell, let's go back even further. The foreign policy of Richard Nixon. Oh, let's go back even further. The foreign policy of Harry Truman, right, is a thread that runs through each of those successive administrations. And there may be some tinkering here and there, but the main thing stays in place. And that is strengthening the alliance, right? Making sure to be the check on our adversaries, and to populate democracy around the globe. Now, some may not have liked the way that last part is played out from time to time, but that's been a part of that narrative, not just for the United States, by the way. And so each successive administration, and you would hear this, particularly in the Trump first term, how people would say that, I may have had disagreements with some of Obama's foreign policy, but in the main, he was part of the continuation of that order.
Democracy was good. Free trade was good. Pluralism was good. We had to watch out for Russia, and we had to watch out for China. And so, freedom of worship, rule of law. You could take those 7 principles, and that was kind of it.
And then along comes Trump, who crapped over all of that. And he began crapping over it when he started on NATO, because Trump never liked NATO. Who knows why? You know what? Because at a certain point, who cares? Because it's irrelevant. Because it's what he is. He just doesn't like it. He has the same affinity against NATO that he has for tariffs. All right. It's anachronistic thinking. It is based off of childhood experiences. I don't know. But he has this thing where he, for some reason, feels that NATO is all transactional and there's nothing of real sub. It's a transaction. You want my protection, you got to pay for it. And you guys haven't been paying us enough for our protection. That sort of mob mentality that he brought to the first term.
When you were chairman of the RNC, it was, of course, the beginning of the Tea Party period. Now, the Tea Party started out mostly as a kind of deficit reduction organization. They weren't really very interested in cultural wars. My memory is they weren't particularly interested in foreign policy. But do you think that strain of the world has ripped us off, and particularly Europe has been ripping us off, and NATO has been ripping us off since the Second World War? When you were chairman and you were very plugged in to Republican members around the country, did you hear the first inklings of that or no?
No. That was not, again, because everyone was agreed on the basics. Everyone was agreed on the basics, regardless of party, regardless of differences about aspects of foreign policy. Everyone was agreed on the basics, those 7 things that you laid out. Everyone was cool with. And again, there would be some tinkering from each administrations around the edges, but in the main, everyone agreed that this is how we keep the order of things. And so Trump comes along and he starts to create transactions around these very things. USAID is a very good example in the second term of how that transactional thinking leads to the dissolution of a very important form of soft power.
Yeah, one of the great tragedies of this year.
How do you put a price on that?
What you've lost, yeah.
We spent $250 million or whatever the number is, but we got back untold intelligence, relationships.
And by the way, we kept China out of some of those countries.
Absolutely. And China's now walking in with millions of dollars and using that leverage.
Is this new thinking Trump and a small group of people around Trump, J.D. Vance, Stephen Miller, I don't know, Steve Bannon, a group of people in the MAGA world, is it them or is it Republican voters? Because there was a poll out from the Ronald Reagan Institute, I think it was just last week, in the last couple of weeks, that showed actually 64% of voters want the US to be more engaged in international affairs, and 87% say it's important for the US to have the most powerful military in the world. There's also a poll out showing that NATO has never been more popular amongst American voters. So, and I get that's going to be voters overall, but I've also seen polling showing that MAGA voters think America should still be supporting Ukraine. So I don't know if Trump is in step with the American public writ large, including quite a lot of Republicans on this.
Yeah, no, he's not. And again, that's why I said the rules-based order.
Another shot.
I know, right? Is ingrained. But here's the thing, Katty, I think it's important to really contextualize. People don't necessarily talk about it the way you and I are now talking about it. Rules-based order, democracy.
Of course.
All they know is my granddaddy fought in World War II. He beat the Nazis and he defended freedom and saved a lot of lives in Europe and saved a lot of lives here at home. And that's the thread that sort of ties successive generations together, which is why this alliance has not gotten weaker, but stronger over 80 years. And so you stop and think about what we, Europe, United States created. How does that sustain itself? The egos alone would blow it up. But there was a fundamental understanding that was embraced by the citizenry of the European continent and the U.S. continent that this is how we govern ourselves. This is how we keep the peace. And yes, we may be the policeman on the block because we have more fill in the blank, but that didn't matter. We weren't looking to be paid for that. We weren't looking for, a transactional relationship with our European partners to provide those things. Trump comes along and flips that script. So even if you get down to the core with the MAGA voters, let alone, Republican vote, but the MAGA voters themselves, that thread is still a viable piece for them too. And so Trump is the one who's leveled up this idea that NATO should pay us and the alliance is bad and we need to align ourselves with Russia. Even if you skip the generational part of the conversation, rationally, why the hell would we align ourselves with Russia? Russia's economy is smaller than California. I mean, what the hell are they going to do for us?
Yeah. And anyway, it's corrupt as anything. And look, that poll I cited shows also that only exactly what you're saying, only 18% of MAGA Republicans think the US should be less engaged in the world. That streak is still there, I think, of global engagement and global leadership. So let me ask you the question I'm asked every single time I'm back in Europe. Does America and does the Republican Party revert to a more normal form of foreign engagement and leadership post-Trump?
I don't think if you have a J.D. Vance or anyone out of the MAGA sphere as president, no. Because they've bought into it and they see the benefits of the grift. So the grift keeps on grifting. Corruption has a way of corrupting, absolutely. And, what's J.D. Vance going to say in 2028 if he's president of the United States, or in 2029 if he's president of the United States? What's he going to say that's different from now? Nothing. He's not going to suddenly reverse, the idea that, put USAID back in operation in some form, which is you can never do again. It's gone. But even if you wanted to come back to some type of creating another form of soft power with this crew, it's going to be soft power with a rock in the glove.
But the message to Republican primary candidates, potential presidential primary candidates in 2028 is look at the polling, because actually there are quite a lot of Republican voters out there who would like America to have a more traditional role in the world.
That may create a lane for a non-MAGA Republican to create a conversation that otherwise would be drowned out because they're not MAGA. I've been trying to disabuse people of this idea that's, in 2028, suddenly we revert back to the GOP 2010. That's just not going to happen. Nothing in history goes back that way, right? It just doesn't. the question becomes what kind of Republican Party will emerge. There are those of us like myself who are fighting within the party to reestablish some key ground for that opportunity in 28, to give a lane for a Nikki Haley type candidate to emerge. I don't know if it'll be Nikki Haley, but someone will emerge on this side, if you will, that will speak to that alliance, speak to the power of a more traditional foreign policy that has served the U.S. and the globe well for over 80 years. And that'll be an interesting sort of comparative conversation for those in the MAGAverse, that 18% who preach isolationism, transactionalism, and align themselves with our enemy, against our allies.
Okay, Michael Steele, you have a book to write, a show to present, a party to save. I'm going to leave you there. That is all that we have time for today.
So good to be with you.
We'll be back on Wednesday, though, guys, answering all of your questions. We've got some great ones for this week. Michael's going to join me for that. Lots of you are asking about these social media checks on tourists that are being proposed. Are the Democrats making some breakthroughs, and how Republicans are going to be positioning themselves ahead of the midterm election? So we'll get to some of those questions. And to listen, of course, you can become a founding member. Sign up at therestispoliticsuos.com. If you want more Michael Steele this week, there's an extra incentive for you to become a founding member right now. Michael Steele, thank you very much for joining us again.
Thank you, Katty. Appreciate you.
See you guys. Thank you.